have to fear is
In war,
fear itself.
there is no substitute for victory.
Let us never negotiate out of fear.
We stand undivided, forever united, fighting hand in hand for the liberty we've earned, for glory and honor, for our sons and daughters, ever mindful of the lessons we've learned. Let the torch of freedom burn.
Welcome to the intersection of faith and politics. This is WallBuilders Live. Thanks for joining us today. Visit our websites at wallbuilders.com and wallbuilderslive.com. I'm Rick Green here with David Barton and Tim Barton. And guys, obviously when we talk about the intersection of faith and politics, when we get into how government works, when we're looking at things from both a biblical and a historical point of view, today judges are a huge part of that conversation, probably more so than ever in our history, and maybe even in a different way than what the founders actually intended. Seems to be the end-all, be-all to everything lately in terms of what laws are allowed or are not allowed. Is that the right historical or even biblical approach to the role of judges?
Well, when you look historically at the role of judges, here's a way to judge where we are now versus where we were then. John Marshall said that the opinion in that day was that any judge rendering a decision different from that of Congress was liable to impeachment. Now, I don't quite think that's the rule today. How often does the court strike down congressional laws on a regular basis? And yet Chief Justice John Marshall said, well, you do that, you're going to be liable to impeachment. And you also have John Jay, who was the original Chief Justice of the U.S. Supreme Court, placed on there by George Washington, went through 2 terms under Washington. When John Adams asked Chief Justice Jay to stay on through John Adams' administration, Chief Justice Jay replied that no, he didn't want to stay on because the judiciary would never amount to anything.
Wow.
And so at that point in time, I think the judicial term was about 6 weeks. The U.S. Supreme Court, I think it was about 6 weeks that they met, somewhere in that vicinity. So it was a very non-influential body. It was never designed to be. If you look at Article 3 of the Constitution, there's very few things they can do. Policy making all belongs to Article 1, Article 2. So their view is very, very simple. Judges don't make policy. If they try to make policy, we'll take them off the court. And by the way, the judiciary, and this is from a guy who wrote the Federalist Papers, one of the 3 authors of the Federalist Papers, the greatest commentary on the Constitution. And he said, I've been Chief Justice 8 years. I don't want another 4 because it'll never amount to anything. Well, that's the original plan. Now, consider where we are today. You have several ways of looking at where we are today.
Well, and let me throw this in there too. This is a very good connection to the fact that a lot of times people confuse the fact that we have 3 branches and they say we have 3 equal branches. And that was never the intent of the founding fathers. It was not to make them equal branches. The branches were different functions for different responsibilities, but they did not have the same power where they all 3 kept each other in check and balance. The reason you had the House and the Senate, the bicameral legislation, was for a check and balance. The reason you had the president was to lead, but then the Congress was there to help oversee and keep in balance. And judges really were just there to uphold the law that was passed, not to interpret or redefine. And they never were given the same level of prestige or power or position that the other branches were.
One of the things the Founding Fathers made sure to do was to make sure that the judges stayed under the direct supervision of Congress, the elected bodies. That's why when you look at the layout of Washington, D.C., when they laid out Washington, D.C., Thomas Jefferson, Secretary of State, oversaw the laying out of Washington, D.C. They built a place for the House, they built a place for the Senate, they built a place for the President, and they built a place for the Supreme Court. But only Congress and the President had separate locations. They put the Supreme Court right beside the Senate, where the Senate could watch over them, because the Senate is the one who confirms their nominations. The President nominates them. It was that way for the first 10 years. They moved in the Capitol in 1800. From 1800 to 1809, the Supreme Court met right there beside the Senate. When the Senate moved upstairs to a new quarters in 1810, the Supreme Court moved into the basement of the Senate, right below the Senate, which they held that place from 1810 to 1859. When the U.S. Senate moved to their current location in 1859, the Supreme Court moved up to vacate the old Senate chamber. I mean, all the way through, the Senate was right there beside the Supreme Court, because the Supreme Court is not to be separate from Congress in the sense that they get away from Congress and away from the supervision. So it was always that way. Now, what happened was in 1940, Missouri came in with what was called the Missouri Plan. And under the Missouri Plan, they said, we don't want people electing judges anymore, and we really don't want them being controlled by legislators the way the Founding Fathers did. What we're going to do is we're going to take a commission of experts, the American Bar Association. We attorneys, we're experts at everything. And so we'll create a commission, and our commission will go through and we will pick from among ourselves the guys we think are best fit to be judges. And we will give that list to the governor, and the governor has to choose from the list that we give him. And if he refuses to choose someone that we in the commission have come up with, then we'll choose who's going to be the Supreme Court justice. So in Missouri, under the Missouri Plan, elected officials don't get to do anything except choose something that unelected people have given them, and it's not reflective of the people at all. People don't get the input in that. Well, that's the Missouri Plan, and about half the states have that, or there's a modified plan called the Tennessee Plan. And the Tennessee Plan says, well, the commission will give the governor 3, and the governor has to choose one of the 3. And again, it's not the governor. It's not like the president making appointments, which is the constitutional way, and it's not like the Senate confirms them. We in the commission, unelected commission, will tell you who you can choose from, and we'll decide. And so then the judges have retention elections. And in a retention election, you simply vote yes or no on the judge. The problem with that is if you don't have an opponent, if you don't have a competitor, there's no way to bring out what the judge has done that's wrong. If you've got a competitor running against the judge, we can say, hey, look, he took this child rapist that raped a 3-year-old child and he turned him loose. Well, that's going to get people ticked. When you don't have an opponent to bring out the bad decisions made by a judge, the last number I saw was somewhere around 98% of retention election judges are retained. It's like a lifetime appointment. So you lose
control. It's kind of easy to get reelected when you don't even have an opponent.
Yeah, it's easy to get reelected. It's a lifetime appointment. So
there's no accountability for what you do, and nobody knows. And so why wouldn't we want you there? After all, you're a lawyer, whatever the case is. And so without the election process, there's not a reflection that gives accountability for the people to even know.
Well, in Tennessee, this Tennessee plan, and about half the states use this. And by the way, some of the states are trying now to move back to elected judges where the people have a voice in this. And that's the way it should be. It's the way the Founding Fathers wanted it. People are supposed to have a voice. The unelected bodies are to be under control of elected bodies, etc. So they're moving back that way. But in Tennessee, because they have this Tennessee plan, their Supreme Court has been so stinking far out of step with where the people themselves are that in this recent election, there was a constitutional amendment passed in Tennessee to help strike down some of the power of these unelected judges and put it back in the hands of the legislature, which is a really positive direction. But that's kind of the background of the Tennessee plan and Missouri plan, and people are starting to see how ridiculous this it is and that they don't want judges making policy for them. So David French, who lives in Tennessee, a good friend of the program, David's got a great perspective on what happened and what's about to happen in Tennessee as a result of the judges losing some of their power.
David French, our guest today. We'll be back in a moment here on WallBuilders Live.
This is David Barton with another moment from America's history. Crime is one of America's most serious problems today. Its effects reach not only the direct victims of its violence, but even those who have not been attacked. The concern for crime has not been limited to this century, however. Our Founding Fathers were also concerned about it. Yet the effects of crime unquestionably were much less in their generation. So what was their deterrent to crime? Signer of the Constitution, James McHenry, answered that question. He explained, "The Holy Scriptures can alone secure to society order and peace. In vain, without the Bible, we increase penal laws and draw protections around our institutions. Bibles are strong defenses. Where they abound, men cannot pursue wicked courses." Founding Father James McHenry believed that widely teaching the Bible was the best means to deter crime.
For more information on God's hand in American history, contact WallBuilders at 1-800-8REBUILD.
Let the torch of freedom burn.
Thanks for staying with us. Welcome back to the David French Hour, hosted by WallBuilders. Okay, sometimes it feels like that, David, because we have you so much. You write so many good articles, and you're such a good commentator. WallBuilders Live is always glad to have you, everybody. David French, thanks for coming on, bro.
Oh, thanks so much. It's great to be here.
Hey, you got of course, this is right in your backyard, so this is a little bit personal for you. But this is amazing that the state of Tennessee has become the abortion capital of the Bible Belt. What is going on in your home state, bro?
Well, what's going on is we had a liberal Tennessee Supreme Court that discovered somehow that the Tennessee Constitution allegedly protects a right to abortion more than dictated by the Supreme Court of the U.S. in Roe versus Wade.
So they've gone beyond what Roe v. Wade has been found.
Right. They went beyond Roe v. Wade. And, of course, the Tennessee Constitution does not mention abortion. But these justices of the Tennessee Supreme Court said that you couldn't even implement the most basic and common sense of abortion restrictions. And the next thing that happened over the next several years was that Tennessee became behind, I believe, just New York and California, the third largest state in the United States for out-of-state abortion. It was easy for people to drive across the border into Tennessee, and we are one of the most pro-life states in the union by the population. So the Tennessee Supreme Court did what the U.S. Supreme Court did, except worse. It found a greater right to abortion than the U.S. Supreme Court found.
Mm. And is there any attempt by the legislature to push back against the court on this?
Well, absolutely. And there's actually really good news about that. So after years of effort, it wasn't, believe it or not, as much as Tennessee has a reputation for a red state, it took a long time for the state to go fully red. But as soon as there was a supermajority in both houses of the legislature of conservatives, they pushed through an effort to amend the Tennessee Constitution, which was voted on this November. And Planned Parenthood outspent the pro-life forces, I think last count almost 3-1, 2-1 at the least, by many counts. And fortunately, the voters of Tennessee, pro-life as they are, enacted a constitutional amendment, reversed essentially overruled the Tennessee Supreme Court, and have now put in the Tennessee Constitution that abortion is to be regulated by the legislature, not by the courts. So that what this means is that the legislature of Tennessee can now regulate abortion the way all other legislatures in the union can. And in theory, if Roe v. Wade is ever overturned, the legislature of Tennessee would have the ability to outlaw abortion in Tennessee.
Well, okay. There's a lot of good news in what you just said on so many fronts. I mean, first of all, just the fact that the people voted overwhelmingly the right way, despite being outspent 3-1 on this thing. I'm sure there was a lot of misinformation, like they do in these kind of campaigns.
It was terrible, absolutely terrible misinformation, and Planned Parenthood pulled out all the stops, but they couldn't message their way, really lie their way to victory here.
Okay, so that's huge. That's big news. The second one is man, to me, what an encouragement that everybody didn't just sit back and say, well, the court has spoken. They have the final say. We can't do anything. Instead, they said, hey, we've got a branch out of control. There's a way to push back and put that branch back into its proper place. And so the legislature and the people stood up and did that in this case. What a great example for us.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, made me proud to be a Tennessean. And getting a constitutional amendment in Tennessee is not all that easy. It does not happen all that often. And Tennesseans often vote against constitutional amendments because they pretty much rightfully like the state the way it is. It's a pretty great state to live in, so there's a lot of hesitance for people who don't follow politics closely to vote for constitutional amendments. But here, it was a well-drafted amendment. The yes on one folks, it was called Amendment 1, had a fantastic plan, even though they were outspent. The signs, the yes on one signs blanketed the state. It turned into a real celebration of life. It was very deeply encouraging. When we have so much bad news out there, it was so deeply encouraging to see, and pastors rallied on this. A lot of times people will say, well, the church doesn't do enough. The pastors in the state of Tennessee really came through in spite of threats that were lawless, to try to do something to the tax exemption. I ended up writing a letter to every pastor in the state of Tennessee articulating their constitutional rights. And to their credit, they came through. Church members came through. This was a church organized, a church, this was a rally for Christians, a celebration of life, and just a stinging defeat for the abortion lobby.
That's great, man. Good, very good news. So do you think that following this now, that the legislature will take up additional pro-life measures, or what do you kind of see coming down in the future?
Oh, absolutely. There's multiple measures already in process. This is something, we're really just at the beginning stages here. You know, we're in a region where that has been defending life. You know, down in Texas, amazing things have been done. Abortion clinics have been closing. Just across the border here in Mississippi, I believe there's only one left, one abortion clinic in the entire state, and it's only clinging to life through a federal court order. So, you know, we'd like to follow the example of some of these other great southern states that have really celebrated life, protected life, and the abortion industry is fleeing. It's incredibly encouraging.
David French is our guest. Stay with us. We'll be right back on WallBuilders Live.
This is David Barton with another moment from America's history. Today, we heard that our founding fathers were largely atheists, agnostics, or deists. The writings of founding father Richard Henry Lee strongly refute that assertion. Richard Henry Lee was a signer of the Declaration of Independence, and he is specifically the man who made the motion in Congress that America separate from Great Britain. Following his death, his papers and correspondence, including numerous original handwritten letters from other prominent founding fathers, were passed on to his grandson. After having studied those letters, this was how the grandson described our founding fathers. He declared, "The wise and great men of those days were not ashamed publicly to confess the name of our blessed Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. In behalf of the people, as their representatives and rulers, they acknowledged the sublime doctrine of His mediation."
For more information on God's hand in American history, contact WallBuilders at 1-800-8REBUILD.
Let the torch of freedom burn.
Welcome back. Thanks for staying with us here on WallBuilders Live. Our guest today, David French. Always good to have David on the program, and particularly now, just a ton of good news that came out of this election in Tennessee just a few weeks ago. Let me ask you, David, your perspective as an attorney that works with ACLJ and does all these cases before the Supreme Court. I mean, you're in the middle of these fights on a lot of different levels, from Obamacare to you name it. And just your perspective of the view of the court as the end-all, be-all, you know, once they say something, that's it, it's dead. How much of an impact does this have on that mindset, that you don't have to just quit fighting for what's right because a majority on one court says one thing or another?
Well, you know, I think it's the life issue more than anything else that has taught Americans that judges don't have the final say in our culture. Because think about this. When Roe v. Wade was decided, the left was absolutely confident that the pro-life movement would just wither away. The court had spoken, the issue was decided, everything was settled, and yet the March for Life is strong. There have been more abortion regulations passed in the last 5 years than in about the previous 25 to 30 combined. There are more pro-life children than there are parents. I mean, you know, kids tend to be more pro-life than their parents. We have the momentum. And as a result, the number of abortions, although, you know, these things are difficult to track, the number of abortions seems to be plummeting around the country. So the court spoke, but the people are speaking back, speaking very loudly, and through the democratic process and through patient, person-by-person communications, spreading a culture of life in this country. And the pro-life movement is not just held firm, it's grown.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Good news all the way around on so many fronts, man. You even mentioned some additional ones there in terms of pastors being involved, that they didn't shy away from this very important battle, that they got engaged, that churches got engaged, just citizens letting their values be inform them on what they do and the stances that they take, and therefore informing the government that they have. So, that, man, there's a lot of good news to take from what has happened there, and hopefully a model for the rest of the country. And again, just back to this whole court thing. I mean, this is getting, I hope, closer to the founders' view that the court was not supposed to be people making their political stance on an issue, but they were supposed to simply be applying the law that the politicians in the legislature did. So instead of an issue, a hot potato issue like abortion being decided by the court, it should be decided by the legislature and the people. So maybe this is moving the whole system itself back in the right direction.
Well, it's certainly a step in that direction. I have no question about it. And it was just a banner day for me when I opened the mail one morning, and there was a letter from my elders of my church explicitly urging all members of our congregation to vote for Amendment 1 in Tennessee. And I thought, this is a great moment. This is a moment when the church is standing for life. And I was just very thankful to play the tiniest part in all of it.
That's awesome, man. What before I let you go, what the folks that organized this and made this, effective and successful, because strategies matter, tactics matter. I mean, you got to do it the right way. Will we have them hopefully working to help other states and help other folks around the country do the same thing?
I would think so. I mean, we have a great group of pro-family legislators and activists here in the state, but it wasn't just folks from this state who helped. I mean, the national pro-life movement got involved, and I'll tell you the truth, it helps to have some really strong Christian pro-life members of the country music world.
No kidding.
We've got a little bit of pop culture on our side down here, so we've got some advantages that maybe folks in Hollywood don't have.
Give me some examples. Did some of the stars actually get involved and support?
I'll tell you one guy, and was really fun having him in our office. Was Darrell Waltrip got heavily involved.
No kidding.
In this fight, and so I enjoyed talking to him in our office. Deeply involved in it. A number of Christian musicians held concerts to raise money. It was very encouraging. So we had a really good time seeing the entertainment side of the industry. And a lot of people say, well, that's always going to be liberal. Always going to be liberal. No, not always. There are folks out there who are willing to stick their heads above the foxhole and stand up for life. And so we won, and it wasn't close. And it was particularly important because under the Tennessee law, you have to get enough votes. You have to compare the number of positive votes you get to the total number of votes cast for the governor. And in this case, our governor was running essentially unopposed. I mean, there was a Democratic opponent, but he barely campaigned, and so we had to get a certain percentage to match his total vote count, and we were able to do that, and it was outstanding, just a tremendous result. And I think of all of the good things that happened in November, this was the one that made me the happiest.
Wow, that's great, man. That's fantastic. Great news going into 2015. So let's take that momentum and build on it. David, God bless you. You guys keep up the great work, and look forward to getting you back on the program again soon.
Thanks so much.
That's David French. Back in a moment with David Barton. Have you ever wanted to learn more about the United States Constitution but just felt like, man, the classes are boring, or it's just that old language from 200 years ago, or I don't know where to start? People want to know, but it gets frustrating because you don't know where to look for truth about the Constitution either. Well, we've got a special program for you available now called Constitution Alive with David Barton and Rick Green, and it's actually a teaching done on the Constitution at Independence Hall in the very room where the Constitution was framed. We take you both to Philadelphia, the cradle of liberty in Independence Hall, and to the WallBuilders Library, where David Barton brings the history to life to teach the original intent of our founding fathers. We call it the Quick Start Guide to the Constitution because in just a few hours through these videos, you will learn the Citizen's Guide to America's Constitution. You'll learn what you need to do to help save our constitutional republic. It's fun, it's entertaining, and it's going to inspire you to do your part to preserve freedom for future generations. It's called Constitution Alive with David Barton and Rick Green. You can find out more information on our website now at WallBuilders.com.
Let the torch of freedom burn.
Welcome back. Thanks for staying with us here on WallBuilders Live. Back again with David Barton and Tim Barton. Guys, man, this is we've always been talking about wanting victories at the court level and even the structural level. This is great news coming out of Tennessee. Let's see this happening more across the country.
To show you how far out of steps, David says some things that really floored me because I speak in Tennessee a lot. You speak in Tennessee. Tim does. But I had no clue. I mean, if you'd asked me to name the three most pro-abortion states in America as far as out-of-state abortions performed, I would have chosen California. I would have chosen New York. I would not have chosen Tennessee. I would not have chosen Tennessee as the third most number of out-of-state abortions, that people flood into Tennessee to get their abortions done. Because, across the South and the Southeast, we're really pro-life down here, whether it's Texas or whether it's Arkansas, whether it's Oklahoma, whether it's Louisiana or Mississippi, Alabama. I would not have thought Tennessee. That's how far those judges have it out of step with the people. And the elections have shown how far the judges are out of step, but now they're getting back in.
Well, and the people of Tennessee are very pro-life, as David pointed out. And it's interesting that the majority of these abortions are people coming from out of state, which, by the way, if they're coming from out of state, it also tells you something about their state, that they didn't have accessibility. Right, they didn't have accessibility in their state either. And so this is where it's so crazy how these judges have gone so far off the reservation, so to speak, that, again, no accountability. And so they're making decisions that don't reflect the people, that they
don't even reflect the region.
Not at all.
And it sure doesn't reflect the Tennessee Constitution, because Constitution does not, like you said, it was worse than the U.S. Constitution. They made this up out of whole cloth. But it was really good for David to say that the pastors took the lead on this.
Absolutely.
That the pastors got behind this thing, and the pastors are the one who really got this constitutional amendment moved. I mean, that's great news. Not only is it great news that they're limiting judges in Tennessee and that they're becoming more pro-life, it's great news that the church took the leadership in doing that.
And just in the mindset of people that judges are not, they're not untouchable, that their ruling is not final. The people do have the final say. So great just in terms of our attitude and being willing to work the system in the right way. So great stuff all the way around. Special thanks to David French for coming on today as well. Thank you for listening to WallBuilders Live.
We stand undivided.